would just like a clarification of one of the earlier slides. You show that the population in need is about 37,000 individuals. You had broken them down into categories. Is it also correct then that the budget that can be spent for these individuals, was that $1 billion?
$1.5 billion, yes.
For these 37,000 individuals?
Well, it also includes the IRIS program, which serves almost 6,000 people, and PACE and Partnership are a couple of other programs. And the nice thing about PACE and Partnership, and they've tended to be the more financially viable programs, although I think there are a number of NCOs that are doing pretty well financially at this point. They publish their financial reports on the DHS website in case you want to look at them. In fact, Tom Lawless said that's why they publish them, so people can look at them.
Yeah, I was just curious then as to the amount per individual. I know it varies, but the total number of individuals divided into the 1 billion, how much dollar amount is that per person?
Well, each of the MCOs has a rate that they're paid. I had one slide that was addressing that, where they're paid on a per person per month basis, and that's the best way to look at that at this point.
If you want to imagine this, it's pick $3,000 as a monthly amount that a lot of the MCOs get, a little more, a little less. And remember, we take off about 20% of that, so every MCO has on average about $2,400 on up to almost $3,000 on average. So that means if somebody's getting $4,500 worth of services, then there better be somebody else who's only getting $1,500 worth of services. And that's how managed care works.
Okay, thank you.
All right. How much power do we as guardians have? Because I've come up against Care Wisconsin trying to take service away from my daughter and found that I had no power at all. I said, this is the service I want for her. She was receiving it, and of course, they wanted to cut it. So what makes us guardians? Why do we go to the expense?
You are guardians, and if they're not doing something you want, they're supposed to give you a notice of action saying, you asked for this thing, we're saying no, here's your right to appeal, here's a handbook that explains how to appeal, and they're supposed to help you appeal. And even before that, of course, they should have done that whole RAD process with you. And unfortunately, there's way too many stories of people who say, we were just told there's nothing we could do, and you have to find out about those things at a place like this. Well, that's unfortunate. But that's how you fight about it.
Yeah, okay, so what are you saying to us as guardians then? How much power do we have with the saying of this is the service we want?
You have to use the family care language like Rock was talking about earlier. So first of all, you talked about outcomes, not services. If you're talking about the outcomes to start with, and then you have a discussion about the service that best meets that outcome. So always remember that.
Okay.
And then, if you're not in agreement, then you go through that RAD process, and ultimately you can appeal a decision. I mean, there's a couple of different ways you can appeal, and you can get help from the ombudsman to do that. Yeah, and how did you do?
I won the fight, but not the war.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. So, and the other thing is, why don't we have a choice? I mean, like Care Wisconsin, we're in Jefferson County, and that's all we have for service. We have no other outlet to go to.
One of the things that we heard last week when we met with the state of Wisconsin's Department of Health Services is that they are intending to promote more competition between the MCOs. In principle, that sounds good. When you're talking about 9 MCOs dividing up approximately 37,000 people, though, you're talking about numbers that in competition can be problematic, because the fewer numbers of people that an MCO has, the fewer numbers of people they have to spread the risk across, the more financially vulnerable they become. And so one of the concepts that we're trying to push back with is, maybe at some point, as they're doing these RFPs and they're allowing people to come in, they have to start to talk about what's the minimum number and how you prevent adverse selection from occurring, because it's very possible that there's one MCO that's going to get all the bad cases or all the high costly cases, and then that's going to sink them financially if they're not being accommodated in terms of what they get paid. So without risk sharing, I think that's a huge thing. We don't have risk sharing here in Wisconsin like we should have, where extra money can be put in depending on the type of individuals that MCO is responsible for, and we don't have outlier coverage. So in other states, there's some arrangements that can be made. So if a person is costing above $8,000 a month, that doesn't penalize the MCO and put them under. I mean, you can literally get somebody out of a state institution who's going to be much more costlier than $8,000 a month, and the state regards $8,000 as kind of that threshold above which they're considered an outlier. So it's very difficult for me to see how competition is going to solve the basic financial problem, because basically you're going to be at each other's throats. And then of course the other thing is they're putting 5 RFPs out that's going to basically say, in this particular area we're trying to encourage competition. Well, does that mean that what are the parameters of that? Are they going to allow those private insurers to come in at this point? Because all we have right now are these nonprofits. Ostensibly anyway, the nonprofit is to exist, to serve its members. Private insurers have to comply with certain things as well in a contract, but there's concern that maybe they're going to be more concerned about the bottom line than they are about serving members.